Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, it is day 13 of RPG A Day 2018, and today's question is describe how your play has evolved. And after the light and fluffy, wild character concept, questions for this weekend, we kind of dive right back in with a really deep question, or at least it's deep for me. One of the interesting things is you can see my play evolving or my perspectives evolving before your very eyes if you watch this channel, because I've kept all the older videos up, and I've certainly had a change, or I've certainly evolved, over time, and you can kind of see that if you'd like to. And I keep them up for me, if nobody else, to kind of take a look at the differences and what have you. But going back to the beginning, in 1981, when I first got exposed to role-playing games through Dungeons and Dragons, that's all anybody I knew played. We knew there were other games. I'm pretty sure I might have seen a copy of something like Top Secret or something in the local music store, the local head shop, I think. But like everybody I knew, everybody in my circle, they were all playing Dungeons and Dragons, and to be honest with you, they were all playing AD&D. Very few people actually played Basic. So that was it. And so fast forward to today, over the past few years especially, I've been branching out into various games that aren't based on that old school D&D. I've tried the modern versions and didn't like those at all, but I've branched out to a bunch of different systems, things like Ubiquity and 2D20 Star Trek, and checking out the Fantasy Flight game Star Wars, and there's a bunch of other stuff. I've talked about various games I've looked at, Powered by the Apocalypse stuff, a whole bunch of other stuff. And I've been having a lot of fun. I've been playing a bunch, and I've been reading a lot more. And it's been really kind of neat as I examine different systems, different mechanics, some which I find novel and really neat, like this is cool, and some I'm not quite so sure about, but I'm having fun checking out the whole package, so to speak, and really doing that. So I've kind of broadened my perspective. So one of the ways I've evolved, as a gamer is checking all that stuff out. But part of my evolution isn't just trying these new games, but discovering how these different systems actually kind of shape and inform the game experience. And that's been really fascinating. And that kind of ushers in the next facet of my evolution is, over time my approach to gaming has become very analytical. I'm an analytical person to begin with, but as a kid, when we first started playing, there wasn't a heck of a lot of analysis going on, except for the attempts at realism every once in a while. And those, met with, various levels of success. And then we started to decide, do we really want this realism, not want this realism, is it really working? We get into the well, actually conversations, all that kind of crap. When I returned to the hobby in 2010, I really kind of dove into more like the analysis, the mathematical analysis of mechanics and probabilities, and if you change this, what happens, what are the odds, And I was really interested in what the odds were, and that's something that still carries over till today. But I started to be very analytical about games in that manner. And when I look at any game, I kind of like tear the system apart and say, well, how does this actually work? What kind of success failure ratio or whatever it does? What does it actually produce? And start to wonder, well, how does that make the game feel? But this penchant for analysis kind of has spread to the bigger picture over time, especially today. And so I start asking questions like, when I look at a game, what does this game do? How does it do it? How does it make things feel? How well does it do what it's supposed to do? What does it not do, or what does it not really do very well? Does it really create the experience that it advertises? All this kind of stuff. How competent are the characters? The various things you can look at in a game system, and I've become much more interested in analyzing that sort of stuff. But this bigger picture, it doesn't just include the games, but in our own intentions for play. And so that's something where I've had a much more analytical approach to the hobby, which you probably know if you watch this channel. And some people really resist the idea of categorizing people. I'm not one of them. And I don't mean pigeonholing, but I just mean being able to talk to somebody and figure out for myself, like, where do I lie at a particular spectrum? And people are just different in some areas. And so for me, part of the thing is making sense of the diversity that I see in the hobby, recognizing when our intentions really align with each other, when they're really diametrically opposed, coming to understand the things that could lead to friction down the road, and figuring out like how to avoid and alleviate those conflicts before they happen or when they're happening in an amicable way, manner. That to me is a decent part about being analytical, and that way when I'm mindful, I'm able to game responsibly. But it's interesting too, in terms of like how this intentions for play, match up with these games and what do they actually produce. But after all that, I can finally talk about how my own play has evolved. So I really get to answer the question, because really I've been kind of dancing around it with all this other stuff, but it has been part of my evolution as a gamer. So as far as me approaching games, in the beginning, it was all about the adventure. It was all about getting things done. It's all about overcoming challenges. That's how we played, the games. Completing the next mission, all that stuff. Characters, like real characters, sometimes showed up. And I mean real characters like they had a real personality, they had real drives. They weren't just me or an avatar of me or an avatar of one of my friends. They were just this character that kind of developed over time. But they weren't the actual focus of play. They were something that just happened. But the thing is, they were enjoyable. And, it took me a long time to figure out that the sessions felt a lot more satisfying when that was the case. I wasn't quite sure. For a long time, I just this was a good session. I really had fun here. Here it wasn't so great. I just wasn't able to put my finger on what was actually happening. Why were some sessions good, and why did some sessions kind of not be so good? But I found out slowly by little that the thing is, I liked it when our characters felt more real, when the world felt more real, when things mattered, and that's where I had the most enjoyment or most satisfaction in gaming. So some of my evolution was just simply noticing that this was happening, and that's what actually was going on, and that was the common denominator in these games that felt enjoyable. And yeah, sure, I like having a little rolling dice with my friends, lighthearted manner, a little just not a big deal. Let's go kill some orcs, but it falls flat for me these days. It's not what I want to do all the time. Sometimes, sure, but I started to be able to notice like when certain elements were enhancing or detracting my experience, and I started to wonder, what can I do about that? And this kind of leads me to like the final part of my evolution so far, because I'm still figuring out who the heck I am and all this, and I think we all are to a certain extent. It's a great thing about the hobby; it'll never be done. I've started to, as a gamer, play on purpose. I wish I invented that statement or phrase, but I'm just stealing it, borrowing it from somebody else. And so while I'm still actively trying all these various different games and games that I read, I was like, I don't think this is probably not going to be my cup of tea, probably not going to be my favorite game, but I still want to try it. I still want to experience it. But these days I have a much better idea of what my intention for an RPG experience is, and as such I can choose like what game do I want to play, what people do I want to play with, because some people definitely detract from that experience because we just have different intentions or whatever. I know like, well, how do I want to behave, what kind of systems do I want to use, what manner do I want to play in, so I know I like this experience as the character, interacting with other real characters in a dynamic world, and sometimes I want it to be like really over the top, cinematic, pulpy. Sometimes I want it to, be grittier and what have you. But those are kind of shades. Sometimes I want different tones. But generally, my default or my go-to experience that I want is something that feels a little bit more real, like things matter, like I'm having that character in that world. And so, as a result, I pick games and I pick people, and I game in such a way that makes having that experience much more likely. And so that's because I don't want to leave that up to chance. Doesn't mean it's going to be guaranteed every single time, but the idea is by making some informed choices about my behavior, about what I do, who I do it with, I can get the experience that I want a little more often. So that's long-winded way of saying that's how my play has evolved over time. What about yours?